Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends. Thank you for joining us for this session, which is part of the Library Futures EMEA Regional Council webinar series. We will be started shortly. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and that the recording will be published on the OCLC website. For this meeting, we are using WebEx with the following specifications. Your camera and microphone are automatically off. You can open the chat function by clicking on chat in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. We invite you to comment or ask a question during the presentation via this chat function. If you have a question, feel free to send it either to the host and presenter or to everyone if you would like to share with the full audience. You can ask your questions in the chat during the whole webinar. We will make sure the speakers get the questions at the end of their presentations. And if you are experiencing technical difficulties, send a message to the host. We can then check together with you and hopefully find a solution. Now, after having done these housekeeping activities, I would like to officially welcome you to this event. My name is Jan Simane. I am head of the library at the Max Planck Institute for Art History in Florence in Italy. And this year, I'm also pleased and honored to serve as the chair of the EMEA delegation. I'm sure some of you were present during our last conference in Marseille already back in February 2019. I think everyone is now used to follow conferences and webinars online, but our hope, of course, is that we will be able to meet in person again. That's something that the EMEA Regional Council and OCLC are looking forward to. Nevertheless, this is still a good opportunity for us to share the work that the Global Council and the EMEA delegates have been doing. And one of our goals of our executive committee is really to stay engaged with the libraries in EMEA. So we hope you enjoy this short series of webinars this week. To give you some basic information on OCLC. OCLC libraries are part of an active and engaged global network of libraries with approximately 16,000 members across 107 countries. What are the benefits? Well, a global network provides unparalleled access to the world's collected knowledge in ways that cannot be achieved independently. Moreover, a global network provides the ability to address shared challenges at scale. And together, we connect people to the information they need to achieve their goals. In EMEA, which is highlighted in green on the world map, we have over 5,000 member libraries in 61 countries. That's quite a network to reach out to. And this is the task of our EMEA delegation. We are representatives from institutions in 10 countries, and I strongly encourage you to connect with us. To give you a little bit more background what the EMEA Regional Council Executive Committee is mainly doing, we are following an action plan every year on relevant and current topics for libraries. We communicate about the activities of the cooperative regionally and with colleagues, and we assist with the planning and organizing of the EMEA Regional Council conferences, both on site or online. And this is why I know talking to you. Our action plans usually follow a specific topical field. We have been lastly focusing on open access, but also on discovery and fulfillment, and this year on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And there is, by the way, a session later this week right on this topic. In all these fields, we work together with the membership and OCLC Research to gather insights and advance the future of librarianship. And now I am happy to introduce our today's speakers and panelists. We will hear from three members of the OCLC Research section, namely Brittany Brennan, Lynn Silipini-Conaway, and Tizia van der Werf, how OCLC is approaching the challenge of rethinking library concepts in consequence of the corona pandemic, and about feedback they received from selected OCLC member libraries. Our panelists, Stuart Hunt from the UK, Beate Meinck from Germany, and Evi Tramantza from Greece, all three, by the way, members of the EMEA Regional Council, will give additional comments and share considerations based on their own professional experience as library leaders. Now, thanking all speakers in advance, I hand over to Lynn to start with an introduction to the topic. Please, Lynn.
Thank you, Jan. And thank you all for joining us today. It's wonderful to see all of you virtually in the chat. And I miss seeing many of you. I want to talk about a project that we did in OCLC Research. And Julie, next slide, please. It's called the New Model Library. And the project team includes, sorry, next slide, Julie. And you can see that this is a large project team. And we had individuals from OCLC Research and the Research Library Partnership, and also our colleagues in market research. And it would not have been possible without this group. We also had our OCLC librarian working with us to find background information on some of the countries so that we could understand the countries, the regions, and what was happening within those countries and regions during the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And the question was, how will the pandemic change the library model? And the goal of the project was not only to identify challenges and opportunities brought on by COVID-19, but also to talk to library leaders and how find out how they're responding to the pandemic and what new library models might emerge as a result of the social and economic changes brought about or accelerated by the pandemic. So we were really interested in knowing about things that had changed and the library leaders' impressions, their expectations for how the library will be operating in the future. And what we mean by library model is the essence or of what libraries are, how libraries function. And we have, some people have a vision of the traditional library model, but there are, that model has changed drastically. And today we will give you a high-level summary of the changes that a group of library leaders made and what those changes might mean for the future. And from April 23rd of 2020 through July 27th of 2020, we interviewed 29 library leaders, and we had representation from libraries around the world. 17 of the library leaders were at institutions in the Americas, 8 in Europe, 1 in the United Arab Emirates, and 3 in Asia Pacific. Now, we also had different library types represented. So the library leaders represented academic libraries, and 62% were from four-year academic institutions. And there were research universities, there were 10 of them, four-year colleges or universities, 8, and then two-year academic institutions as well. There were 3. And we had public libraries, we had 7, and 1 national library. Now, we identified areas of impact based on the changes made by the library leaders who we talked to. And what came up was the work experience, the collections experience, and the engagement experience. So those are the 3 areas that we saw as the impact areas. And we will talk about each one of those areas today. I will now turn it over to Brittany to talk about the work experience.
Thank you, Lynn. And again, thank you all for being here. The work experience encompasses how work gets done in libraries with an emphasis on library staff. Within the work experience, the new model library will focus on training for the future, making staff well-being a priority, embracing work flexibility, and challenging traditional divisions of labor. So to start at the top, train for the future. Many libraries embraced the opportunity that the pandemic provided for their staff to focus on training, but many also realized that they were catching up on training that had perhaps been neglected for too long. Moving forward, library staff will proactively train for emerging trends and skills, and it will be essential to ensure adequate time and resources for this training. Make staff well-being a priority. The pandemic foregrounded issues of mental, physical, and emotional well-being in the workplace, which some libraries were better prepared to handle than others. Moving forward, staff well-being will be an organizational priority to guide decision-making, communication, and the development of organizational culture. Embrace work flexibility. Remote work became the norm for many during the pandemic, and library leaders anticipated that staff would demand greater flexibility moving forward. Flexible work arrangements don't mean just remote working, but include flexibility in when, where, and how staff work. Including library staff in the process of developing flexible working arrangements will help to create more equitable work arrangements without sacrificing the quality of library services. And finally, challenge traditional divisions of labor. Many libraries had to reassign staff to different roles or departments to accommodate the sudden shift to virtual and the sudden increase in work in particular library activities. These temporary changes prompted many to reconsider the organizational structure in their libraries, as you can see in this quote. For this four-year college library leader, the benefits to the library in removing departmental boundaries really led them to think about working with more blended responsibilities across library staff. And now we'd like to hear from you. Please follow the link in the chat to go to Poll Everywhere and answer this question. Where do you see the biggest opportunity for your staff as we move toward a new model library? Is it in proactively training for emerging trends and skills? In rethinking your organizational structure? In increased work flexibility? In the prioritization of staff well-being? Or maybe it's none of the above. If that's the case, once you've answered the poll, we'd love for you to come back and tell us in the chat what you think the biggest opportunity for your staff is. Fantastic. It looks like rethinking organizational structure and work flexibility are certainly our top priorities. Excuse me. Work flexibility seems to be edging out rethinking organizational structure here. Fantastic. And if you'd like to contribute in chat what you're thinking about implementing or what you've maybe already implemented at your library around any of these topics, we'd be happy to hear about that. But now I'd like to introduce Evi Tramantza, Director of Libraries and Archives at Anatolia College, to discuss the work experience in her library.
Thank you, Brittany. Hello, everyone. Lovely to be part of this event today. And I have a few thoughts to share. So a few points about our approach. During this time, I focused on being open and informed about what other libraries, especially in the West, have been talking about and reporting, what organizations such as the ALA, ACRL, IFLA, OCLC have been recommending and suggesting. Online conferences also helped incredibly. Being part of the discussion brought a sense of calm, decisiveness, resilience, because then we were able to back and to explain our decisions regarding our services in a strong way and advocate strongly. This helped the profile of the library as responsive, adaptable, flexible. It is a huge responsibility to be responsible for the well-being of our staff, of our users, our community, but getting information and sharing information has helped tremendously. Also, weekly training sessions and attending online events has helped, library staff adjust swiftly, get inspired, get up to speed with everything, and kept ourselves motivated this way. So leading through constant change is and has been and is really trying for all of us, I guess, and for me as a director. It was important to survive this and help my team survive as well, to be able to cater for the needs of our community. In the beginning of the pandemic, I started intermittent fasting, daily yoga, healthy eating, etc. And this has helped my resilience. So personal well-being decisions, but also team well-being decisions matter, and I cannot stress this enough. With my team, we had weekly meetings with all library staff with a social section, which has helped us bond, share our news, our challenges, celebrate occasions together, share good well-being practices, and support each other when needed. We talked about exercise, the good news of the week, food, etc. before we went ahead we've been ahead to discuss our project and our projects and updates. The model of working has changed as well, and we allowed flexibility, understanding of circumstances to support and support for our team. During this time, we have accomplished wonderful projects, digitization projects, authorities corrections in our catalogue, much needed guides, hybrid information literacy teaching. This allowed our staff and me to collectively decide where and how staff prefer to work, taking into consideration the service needs, of course, but also, for example, looking after our younger members of staff who take public transport, and we didn't want to put their health in risk. So they didn't have to come to work every day. They work from home, or in other occasions support family circumstances. I have witnessed a wonderful connection between the team and a culture of caring, kindness, empathy, which reflected on our support for our faculty and students. For example, our open daily 2-hour slots with a video link where librarians are waiting for someone to connect have been offered not just for reference and research support, but also for a chat, for a friendly brief meeting to those especially students who needed it. We followed so far all the recommended procedures for the safety of our team, but also of our community. So SafeNets, antibacterials, tissues, masks, protectors, quarantining of books, etc. We did it all. We've been very flexible and we've supported as much as we could, our community. But overall, we feel well I think, because we've been supportive, gentle, calm, caring, hopeful, appreciative, respectful, creative, safe, authentic, informed, able to share, information, and I think that in a nutshell, being aware that well-being and mental health, is important for our community, is a priority for our community, is vital. And this is all from me.
Thank you very much, Evi. Very nice to hear the human interest in
Thank you,
this.
Ticia.
Yes. So I will take over now and talk shortly about the collection experience. So when we talked with library leaders about how they see their new model library emerge in the wake of COVID-19 pressures, the collections came up quite a bit. In many cases, the pandemic accelerated the shift towards the library on demand, where users want resources immediately, conveniently, and in a format of their choosing. Firstly, libraries had to rapidly increase or enhance their digital online offerings. This experience highlighted the importance for the new model library of embedding its acquisition and collection development in a larger strategy geared towards better serving the needs and preferences of the community. It highlighted the need to pay attention to the necessary infrastructure for seamless access, delivery, and use of online resources, and to plan budgeting for the corresponding operational costs. Secondly, libraries quickly implemented changes to maintain access to their print collection during the pandemic, often through contactless pickup options managed by a small number of on-site staff. Users took full advantage of these services, and that demonstrated that the convenience of connecting to the print collection without coming into the library was highly valued. This experience highlighted the opportunity for the new model library to shape its role as an intermediary between analog content and the reader, and to be creative in devising new ways to connect the community to the print collection. Reimagining the physical space of the new model library is another opportunity area to meet the needs and expectations of your community. And thirdly, the increased dependence on the online environment during the pandemic made the digital divide very visible. As library buildings closed, visitors lost the ability to use library resources on site. This created problems for users who do not have internet access nor own the devices necessary to log in. The digital divide will remain and might even accelerate. And so the new model library needs to find ways to serve those in the community who do not have the tools or the skills to operate online. This could be done by loaning or distributing for free connectivity kits and devices. The library could partner with IT providers and companies. There are already successful examples of such partnerships in the field. But overall, library leaders, such as this research university librarian from Spain, brought home the idea that the new model library should shape its collection experience around community needs and adapt its budget allocations, its acquisitions, and collection development accordingly. So this brings us to the next poll. Let's see. If you can please go to your browser tab again, and there you have your poll everywhere. It's still running, and there will be, please choose which option when you're looking at your library's collection strategy going forward, moving to the new model library. Which of these options will your library have as a top priority? And this is looking like it's very, very clear message here with 68%, be strategic in acquisition of digital resources. Fantastic. Still moving a little bit, but I think we are there. It's a very clear message. 75% is about the move to being more strategic about digital resources, and the next up is 90% provide resources that close the digital divide. And then for 7% find new ways to connect the community to the print collection. And only 2 have none of the above, which is not so much. Thank you so much for participating in the poll. And let's go to Stuart now. So I'd like to give the floor to you, Stuart. He's director of the University of Reading Library. Stuart, which would be your library's top priority?
Oh, no, you're putting me on your spot there, teacher. I want to take a little step back, if I may, from
Sure.
that. I think perhaps we're in danger of creating a false antagonism between digital and analog. And I think we need to understand them in terms of a continuum rather than that oppositional approach that we might be inclined to take. And I completely respect colleagues' view of over 70% in terms of the shift to digital and strategy. I think we need to consider digital and analog in terms of complementarity and balance rather than seeing it as something that stands against each other. So what I'd really like to suggest perhaps is that we hear a lot of talk about a shift to digital, and I'm not convinced that that's actually really what we're seeing. I think we're seeing an amplification of what's already been going on. In my university library and many other university libraries similar to mine, probably 80% of our acquisitions budget is spent on digital already. And of that 80% spent on digital, 80% of that is spent on digital subscriptions. So actually there's very little wriggle room in terms of actually increasing what we might be doing. There's little headroom within a finite budget to make those significant changes. And if you're an institution that operates a digital or an e-first approach to acquisitions anyway, then the changes we made 12 months ago, and perhaps we're still continuing to see, are just a solidification of that, or perhaps increasing visibility of things we've already been doing, both in terms to our community, but in terms of to ourselves as well, so that our library staff are much more explicitly seeing the way we're actually acquiring content. Well, yes, we certainly saw a relaxation of copyright law in the UK last year, which allowed us to have a temporary increase of digitisation. And we also saw publishers giving for free access to digital content, but none of us were fooled by why they were doing that, and it soon disappeared because it was a gateway drug for us to subscribe to their content in the longer term. And none of us have probably been able to do that because of the nature of our budgets. So I think we need to take that with a large pinch of salt. In terms of our access to our special collections and archives, I think we've seen something more interesting going on, which is around mediated access to the print. In my institution, we took last summer as an opportunity to launch what we called our virtual reading room, which launched an additional collections website, and we really ramped up our collections-based teaching, which is thoroughly mediated, where what we're starting to see is library staff and archive staff teaching with collections material in a digital environment. And these are workshops that would have gone on in a face-to-face seminar room in the past. So we've seen an interesting change in terms of archives, special collections. But I think the bigger picture is perhaps around what I would call content strategy, which is where we have to consider how we acquire, how we provide access to, how we create, how we curate content in the round. And by that, I think that crosses the whole gamut from open access resources our institutions are actually publishing, all the way through to print and digital collections. And within that strategy, we need to think about the things that where the user sits within that equation as well. And we've got long experience of doing that. We have long worked with DDA or PDA, and we understand what user needs are. And I think all we've actually done is perhaps magnified our responsiveness in terms of that. And a content strategy has to take into account the place of the user within that equation. If it doesn't do that, then what are we actually building? I would question that we're building a mausoleum rather than building a library if we're just acquiring dead content that doesn't actually have any usage. So I think over the last 12 months, we've seen an interesting thing where we've perhaps been thinking tactically, but I would argue we've actually been acting strategically if we have an emergent content strategy. And that, for me, I think is the really important thing, where we really understand the full life cycle of scholarly publishing and the scholarly communications environment. So it's interesting, picking up on the point Lynn made earlier on about the library and demand, and I think that's perhaps where we're actually going. And I think that's really brought home when we are operating within a finite resource. So that's kind of my take, I think, where I think we are. So I'm not convinced there's a digital shift. I think there's a digital amplification. I would also really say against, let's not talk out the words acceleration, because I don't think we're seeing that either. I think we're seeing an intensification rather than an acceleration. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Stuart. And I really agree with you. I put something in chat as well. And the library on demand is exactly what we're hearing from users. And so I am going to talk about the engagement experience. And when I refer to community, I mean both in the academic community, if you're an academic library, and I mean the community in which your public library serves or is located. And one of the things that we heard loud and clear from academic library leaders was the importance of partnering in teaching and learning. And the library staff were often the experts in online teaching. And so this was a great opportunity for the library staff to demonstrate their knowledge and expertise in this area and to become a part of teaching and learning within that community. Also, we heard a lot about the development of information literacy instruction in the online environment. And we heard this from both academic library leaders and public library leaders. And basically, we heard from the public library leaders the importance of the technology classes online, English classes, adult literacy classes. We heard a lot from the academic librarians about teaching students how to determine the credibility of information online, how to access this information, as well as faculty, so not just students. The other thing we heard is become the community hub. And the library leaders referred to this in different ways. Some said, we want to be the knowledge center. Others said, we want to be the place in the community where everyone goes and everyone knows that it's a welcoming environment. And so that means be present where the community lives, plays, and works. And I cannot stress that enough. We have examples in my community in the US in Colorado where the public library is actually located in one of the community recreational centers. And but prior to that, that library was not used very often. And now we have the library being used a lot. Parents may go to a spin class and their children go to a story time. And so being a part of that community, being that hub has been very important for one of these branch libraries because there's a lot of outdoor activities here in that community. In the academic libraries, have a presence in the student unions, in the dormitories, be embedded in the classes, whether they're online or face-to-face, in the gyms on campus. And then last is to collaborate, advocate, and communicate. Again, this is so important. Tell your story. You need to tell the community and those administrators who hold the funding and distribute and disseminate the funding, how the library supports the mission, goals, and strategic plans of the community. Now, this is a quote from a library leader in a four-year college in the US. And as you see, this library leader is saying that the academic library has to be student-focused and that the students want to, it's all about access. And that goes back to that library on demand. Sometimes we want that physical item. When I'm writing, I want that physical book with me, and others may want that as well. When I'm just reading, I prefer to read online. So there are many, except for pleasure, for recreation. I want to read with that print, that I want to hold that book. Yes, antiquated thought for some, but it depends. And so we need to be sure that we are here and providing information in all different types of formats and delivery. Now we have one more poll for you because we want you to be involved as well. And this question is, our community sees the library as a central hub. And if you would like to write something in chat, we would love to hear that as well. And it's great to see that so far about 50% of you are saying yes, that the community does see the library as a central hub. Some are saying, I'm not sure, and others are saying no. And I think one of the things that I've been telling some of my colleagues who are in the libraries, on library staff, to always have a 2-minute elevator speech in your mind. So if you run into a county commissioner, if you run into a provost or chancellor or rector on campus, and you want to talk about the library or something you've done, have that 2-minute speech ready. That's really important. Thank you so much. It looks like, and I am very happy to see this, that 53% of you believe that that the community sees the library as a central hub. That's great. Now I am going to turn it over to Beate Meinck. So please take over.
Yes, hello and good evening. I hope you can hear me. I'm with my headphones. I think it works. Okay. I think this is a very important topic you were talking about, being the community hub. And I think the libraries, especially the public libraries, they were on a perfect way of fulfilling this item. But also I think that the pandemic here destroyed the most. For example, in Reutlingen, after the first lockdown in spring 2020, we were able to offer our customers media lending again very quickly. So there was really no problem. We public libraries here in Germany, we quickly set up pickup and delivery services and where possible, and where it was possible, we made our digital offerings available also for free. The very large institution in Germany have managed to do this, but also the small library had possibilities to do this. Our role as a community place, a place of learning, a place of experience, an important educational partner in the promotion of reading for schools and kindergartens, cultural and democratic institution was strongly linked to the place of the public library. So the place was very special for us. And it was also a big item for being this community place. So naturally, we started to move services into the digital space. First, for example, we informed schools and kindergarten that we are still here, so we are closed, but we are open still. And we advised pupils and students online. We advised research courses online. We provided our digital resources. Teachers could borrow media for their classes, which then came to the students via pick-up at school. So that was crazy, but it worked. Parents came to school and picked up things for their children. But when the first elections started, became possible towards summer, everyone wanted really to come back to the library for guided tours, for introductions, program works, events, and so on. Sure, we continued working hybrid, but the place and the personal encounters were always more important to our partners and customers than the digital offerings. The crisis showed us that the hub works, as I will call it, best works analog anyway. It depends on the library place. Our clients in public libraries are very heterogeneous. We are visited by well-off academic families as well as low-income and educationally disadvantaged people. The former had few problems with the new situation, but the later they did. What would have been really necessary and still is, I think, but it's really crazy, this would be the massive loan of technology, because it's the basis for the new communication at the moment. An example, we offer a free language learning meeting for refugees. It's once in a week. Here, volunteers help refugees with their homework in the official language courses, or give everyday support, for example, in formulating letters and emails. And we just could not longer reach this group in the lockdowns because they often only have a smartphone themselves and no other technology or internet connection. And because so far our infrastructure in the library has been used for such programs. And it's really hard to be a social hub when you cannot really communicate in a new digital world because there is a lack of technology. Okay, so what I have learned for, what is my scenario for the future? As a community hub, we must continue to be an attractive place with a good technical infrastructure that is low threshold and immediately usable for everyone in the city. These places we must be visible in our community and in the city. So we have to be, yes, like we should be highly presented. And also we need to become more mobile. We need hybrid formats with mobile technical possibilities. For example, in Reutlingen, we have applied for funding to purchase a cargo e-bike equipped with mobile technology and ride it out to the people. They are not in the center. For this, however, also our staff must be well trained, and we will need probably even more staff to manage these additional programs. And we need to communicate these new offerings strongly. For example, back to our refugees, our offer is always a companion program. The official language and integration courses take place in adult education center or basic education centers. And here too, the teachers suddenly had no way reaching their students. However, if we were able to lend mobile technology, these refugees could in turn take up their courses. I think public libraries have always been very important partners in social and urban communities, not just since the pandemic. The mission, we have always been focused on the needs of their local community, which is constantly adapting and changing. The pandemic has only added us into a new situation. Our role remains the same. We need to adapt our tasks, preferably together with existing or new partners. And all this together, I think there will be a future for being a community hub in our communities. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beate. You really hit on many of the points that we have heard throughout this project. And one thing that I really want to pick up on as we close today and open it up for others to provide questions or discussion is that whole idea of partnerships. And I think that is something that is extremely important when we're thinking of realigning to develop a new model library. And it's not that we haven't done that before, but as we've heard, it's really important to cultivate those partnerships that you've already created, but to also reach out and to really think about new partnerships, especially because of the technical infrastructure that's been discussed here today for digital resources. And I saw in the comments that some were saying, you know, we're really not the community hub in the digital environment. And it's hard to do that without that technical infrastructure. And so there's a white paper that was written by Brian Matthews in 2012, and he talks about how library leaders should think more about being entrepreneurs. And one of the things that he says, that I use this quote a lot, is that we should spend more time developing partnerships instead of developing services. And I think that's something we really learned. When we talked to these 29 library leaders, which is almost a year ago today, we asked them to describe what library models might emerge in 5 years as library staff continue to adapt to new and changing environments. There's no one size fits all. My mother, who worked in retail for quite a while, always said, one size fits none. And so it depends. And I heard several of our speakers today talk about it depends, and it does, because you need to think about your community needs first and what will work for them, what may not work for other communities. I really think that today we need to move forward, as we've talked about, and really start thinking about this and I like something that Stuart said, that we're intensifying the things that we've done, and we need to keep doing that. So what's next for us? Well, we plan to have a report of these findings available sometime this spring. What we're going to do as well is to have discussion groups once we have the report out. We will also have webinars inviting panelists, as we've done today, to discuss some of the highlights of the report and some of the findings, to talk about how we move forward. We also will be contacting the 29 library leaders who participated in this study for virtual focus group interviews, and be asking others to join in virtual focus group interviews to see how the thinking has maybe stayed the same or changed and over this past year, and to start to really try to develop this new model library. So I want to thank you so much for joining us, and we are going to open it up now for questions and discussion. And so if you would be comfortable, please write your questions or any discussion items in the chat. If you have a question specifically for one of the panelists, please let us know. Thank you again.
Thank you. I see a lot of activity in the chat, but I don't think I've seen any questions. Please let me know if I missed it. Just put it in there again. So I am just scrolling through the chat to see if I've missed anything. No, I don't see any questions, so I will hand over to Jan so we can move forward.
Yes, thank you, René, and many thanks to all speakers for this really rich panorama of challenges, insights, and first and foremost experiences. I would just like to close this series of presentations with observation I took from the comments. There was one comment made by my dear colleague Birgit Dankert from Germany, who liked in Beate's presentation the realism and the optimism. And I think these are the most important takeaways, so to speak, we should have after this long series of observations, experiences, and insights. And thank you, dear attendees, for sharing your attention with us. Before closing this webinar, I would like to remind that tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, we are going to hold 2 other webinars in the framework of our virtual EMEA regional conference. The first is dedicated to developments around bibliographic metadata, and the second to this year's annual theme, the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you would like to stay connected and be updated with news on our activities, you are kindly invited to subscribe to the OCLC newsletter. So thank you again for your attendance, and have a nice afternoon or evening wherever you stay. Goodbye.